Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. Before we begin with Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, I know that many of you watching have felt a sense of being ungrounded, unhinged, or out of balance in these times. I know. I've felt this way too. Kris's teachings have similarities to popular ideas such as the law of attraction and the secret. The difference is that Kris's knowledge goes even deeper into reality creation and helps resolve many of the problems identified with the law of attraction. The information he shares helps restore grounding and that sense of balance that many of us have lost in these times. If you're ready for the law of attraction and secret 2.0 and want to be a part of this fantastic community, then hit that like button, subscribe, drop a comment below, and press the bell icon so that you get notified when Kris releases cool, new metaphysical content. Kris also offers life-changing online seminars, private sessions, and mentoring sessions, which are all linked in the description below. Glad you're here with us, and let's jump into it. And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And today, we are going to be talking again with Kris. I know last time we talked a little bit about the concept of aliens and what really are those, as well as getting then later in this next episode, getting into dreams and some of the dream realities and how that connects to our conscious life. And perhaps we might build a little bit on that. And but Serge and I were having a really interesting conversation before we went on live here. So I just wanted to pass it to Serge to say hi and tell us a little bit about that story.
Sure. I just this afternoon walking the dog, or for this morning, it was today. I was walking the dog, and just about a block from here, a block and a half, there's a little apartment building on the street corner, and I was on the opposite side. And I was talking to a friend on the phone, and I just happened to look up at the rooftop of this. It's like a 2.5-story tall little apartment building. And what surprised me was there was a robin up there. And he was looking right down at me, which I thought was interesting because, first of all, I'm used to seeing robins on the ground, like in the grass, looking for, food, foraging. It was right up there and it was looking right at me to the point where I almost went, hi. And the strangest feeling came over me, which I associated with Jane Roberts' books, the Oversoul 7 series, where 7, the Oversoul, has these focuses and he checks in on them once in a while. And I just found it so strange. It was almost like my own higher self or oversoul was there, just, peeking in and saying hi, kind of looking in on me. It was a very strange sensation, very comforting as well. And interesting, kind of led me to go off on all these tangents. But it was an enjoyable little moment. I wonder how many people do have those kinds of little episodes and may not necessarily make an association.
Yeah, they just don't have the background to place an understanding or, yeah.
Yeah, anything really. And I'm sure there are all sorts of other encounters that we have. But, we're usually so distracted by all the things in our environment, we maybe not pay attention. So it just caught me off guard, that's all, but in a good way. So I was happy about that.
Yeah, I think if you're not open to phenomenon like that or open to those things, then you're just not, they're there, you just wouldn't see them. Yeah.
Yep.
Wouldn't perceive it. Yeah. Well, interesting. Well, I wonder if Kris will have anything to say about that.
Yeah.
Sure.
When has he not had something to say?
Yeah. I know better by now, right?
Yeah. So why don't we just zoom in on him instead of a bird?
Okay. All right, Serge. Thanks. Nice story.
Now we trust that you are comfortable.
Oh, very comfortable. Thank you, Kris.
Indeed. And we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thank you as well.
Well, Joseph's little episode, of course, is not a reflection of his bird brain, but rather an interesting reflection, which is also how he picked up from us the idea of what we call koshas, Koshas, which simply means layers that are added onto the self. This is done through familial upbringing, accepting certain so-called truths of reality, establishing belief systems, assumptions, expectations in certain ways about yourself, your life, your environment, your reality, your world, and everything else in between. So these beliefs or ideas, assumptions, and so on are just readily applied to your understanding of the self, as if somehow or other this is the way you should be, that you should be thinking, you should be acting, you should be behaving, you should be believing. Everything that everyone around you also believes. It is, in effect, a very nice way to feel part of the family, part of the group. Group thinking. Believe as we do, and we will accept you. Do not believe as we do, and we may have to have words, or you will feel ostracized. So it is a kind of safeguarding mechanism. It keeps you safe in a certain kind of environment, but it also has a secondary effect. It actually may prevent you from exploring other ideas, other creativities and potentials that you also have. Because if you explore certain creative potentials, perhaps it will lead you away from those particular kinds of assumptions that allow you to feel part of your family. So you might want to just keep those very close to you and not stray too far off that particular driven path. And this is where, after some time, individuals may begin to have a struggle because there might be powerful creative thrusts, pushing, pulling, demanding attention, which, of course, they would say no to. I have held certain ideas, assumptions for some time. It has helped keep me within the framework of what I love, what I know, and venturing too far outside, perhaps even going left field or right field or somewhere further afield, may make me feel uncomfortable, take me out of my comfort zones, without necessarily understanding that the only way you can get to grow as a person into more and more of your own loving potential is to begin to shed some of those koshas or layers. Much like after some time, people may get cataracts, which are layers of protein that eventually have to be removed. Otherwise, you effectively go blind. You cannot see. And there is often a direct association, psychologically speaking, or if you like, subconsciously speaking, wherein there is a clouded sense of vision about oneself and one's nature, one's creaturehood, one's potentials and creativity, always wanting to keep within the same patterns. And once the cataracts are removed, then one can see clearly, just as once the layers are understood and removed, one can see and live clearly. So this is a very interesting side of the human experience. We have spoken about this in the past, where change is often feared, and yet change is the way you grow, the way you become more of whatever it is that you have always wished yourself to be, by putting yourself slightly or more out of your own comfort zones. And once you become accustomed to that process, of course, then the old comfort zones are recognized as having been too confining, too restrictive, almost like wearing a straitjacket, wherein you cannot freely understand yourself, your own impulses, your own desires, and follow up on those creative ideas that you have. And in regards to Joseph and his little robin, that occurs more often than he actually recognizes. And the idea is that over time, he has learned to shed certain layers of self-imposed limitations. And human beings do that very, very often and not recognize it. And if one wants to stretch their creativity, their imagination, then recognizing those restrictions becomes an important growth factor. Any ideas, and they are usually acquired from a very young age. Children have all sorts of creative ideas that they want to explore. Even the idea we spoke of earlier concerning imaginary friends and creativity. So the more you actually seek out those kinds of little connections with the universe, with your inner universe, the more they begin to pop up. The more you notice them, the more will show up. And we are not talking here about a stampede, of course, but we are speaking about those delightful little moments that literally suspend everything you think you know about yourself and your reality, only to be given these little gifts that spur your imagination on, that turn on that creativity spigot and let the juices of life flow more freely. It can also be very freeing as well as healing, because once this starts to flow, you can actually feel more of yourself than anything else. So this is a very nice subject matter for viewers and everyone else to keep in mind, that you can see more of life than only your senses pick up. The senses, if encouraged, the ego, if encouraged, will pick up what it is that you are seeking. They will assist you. This is very important as well. Someone with a creative mind, an artist, a painter, a sculptor, may start out small. An archaeologist also, treasure hunters also start out small, looking for little things. But once they acquire the knack, once they begin to grok this, then they begin to see things their eyes might never have noticed before. An archaeologist may see things in the ground. A paleontologist and Egyptologist may see things popping up out of the ground that ordinarily would have been ignored or glossed over, not picked up on. An artist may begin to see things in nature, in the trees, in the bushes, in the flowers, in the petals that normally would have escaped to them, and they become more and more inspired to paint. A sculptor may see things that ordinarily would be viewed simply as a block of stone or a lump of clay, where suddenly inspiration seems to wash over them, and they no longer see the lump of clay or the block of stone, but a form within it, an idea. And they remove everything that is not that idea from the stone. They mold and shape the clay into what is in their mind's eye and in their hearts. So that makes for a very, very interesting life. A chef, for instance, may have started experimenting with boiling water as a youngster, until eventually they begin to discover the mixes of certain spices with certain foods and certain sauces that produce titillating, tasty, divine tidbits, foods, and desserts. But everyone has to start somewhere. And the same applies here for a spiritual journey, a spiritual quest. It is not just about reaching a state of enlightenment, because there is no such a thing. It is, however, about reaching a state of appreciation, a state of wonderment, a state of being able to see the extraordinary in even the most ordinary, mundane thing. Some people call it being able to see the divine in the mundane. And we will agree with that, because it is all around you. In fact, it is you. You may just need to learn to see yourself in a different way, with a different lens and a different light, and see that you are not just a lump of flesh, but you are creative energy in the act of creating itself. And that has a significant impact upon the whole of the personality. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I've been following you, Kris. Do you have time for a question?
Indeed.
So I guess I was, as you were speaking, I was understanding, I talked with Joseph a little bit about maybe a misconception. I was thinking previously, about if koshas are beliefs, but as you were talking, it was sounding like these are specific beliefs that cloud our understanding of self. And there's
Indeed.
other types of beliefs that aren't koshas that can actually help us to see that self. Is that true? Can you go into that a little?
In a manner of speaking, yes, you are certainly correct. So there are sets of beliefs that are unavoidable. Believe it or not, even the whole manifestation of your lives is based on beliefs. But there are certain sets of beliefs that eventually, acquired, perhaps originally seen in a helpful light, no longer function in a helpful manner. You need and you always have beliefs. Beliefs are the foundations of creation. The instruments of creation themselves, as we have suggested strongly, are feelings, emotions, and imagination. Your assumptions and perceptions put all of this into action. These are the engines of creation. You will always have beliefs because you need to create your environments wherever you happen to be, whether it is in the dream state, whether it is in the life between life states, It does not matter. The point being that you need to zoom in on those kinds of beliefs that benefit and enhance your own values and the fulfillment of those values. So that is what is important. So if you believe yourself to be an insignificant speck of dust, you may begin to experience that you are insignificant. People simply do not honor you. People do not communicate with you, and on and on. You may have been told as a child it is better that you neither be seen nor heard. How does that build your confidence, your sense of self-worth? It does not. But if you do not recognize that this is an assumption that you have accepted, and it will literally cover your sense of self, it will layer it so that you act out not having very good sense of self-worth. And other people may reflect that to you. They may treat you as if you are a worthless individual. It is not their fault. It is not your fault. It is simply a set of assumptions. They might even have been rooted so deeply, they can be called root assumptions about reality. Even though that can be uprooted, removed, those layers peeled back for you to see that you are a worthy and worthwhile individual. You do not need to justify who you are. Simply being is all the justification that is required for you to be yourself. But somebody who has delved into the beliefs of lack of self-worth may have a long struggle in order to actually clean this kind of programming, indoctrination out of their system. It can become, in fact, a virus, just like a computer virus. It will take over the whole system. Or even a physical virus that makes you ill. It will affect your entire system until it is removed. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm following you.
So you can easily transform any kind of negatively impacting systems of thoughts that you've acquired over time. And we should say very clearly, beliefs are neither negative or positive. You can recognize that you may think that perhaps you might be a little bit less worthy of being who you are. But if you do not decide to focus on that kind of thinking and just let it out of your system, in one door, out the other, as the saying goes, in one window, out the other, it might have no effect at all. But the minute you start thinking, perhaps I am not a worthy individual. Perhaps all of these people are right. They perhaps have a right to put me down. Perhaps I am wrong. Perhaps even my being is wrong. Then the problems begin to settle in, make themselves at home. They live in your mind. They occupy your space. That is an occupation. But if you pay it no mind at all, do not take the bait, it will move away. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, coming down to perception, the power of perception and focus.
Indeed. So if you do not engage focus upon those kinds of thoughts, or whether it is self-disapproval, self-criticism, and just let it go, then the thought itself becomes meaningless. And you may entertain hundreds, if not thousands, of meaningless thoughts throughout the whole day. If you don't engage them, they are just that, meaningless thoughts. But do not begin to think that you are yourself meaningless. Then it becomes a challenge. Because then you will cloud your vision, your perception, and you will begin to perceive that perhaps you are unworthy of being who you are. Perhaps you should be criticized. Perhaps you should become more critical of yourself and put yourself down. Self-disapproval in that way has no spiritual values. If you don't engage it, then nothing can truly affect you. You can become like a nice piece of Teflon. Don't give that kind of thinking any place to set roots in the fertile land of your mind. The mind is an extraordinary garden. You can grow all sorts of beautiful plants, flowers, vegetables. But if you start sowing seeds of discord, then discord you shall have. The old saying does apply that you reap what you sow. Does that also make sense?
Yep. Yeah. That's been my experience.
Once you start catching on and you learn about the powerful faculties of focus and perception, you can literally turn this scenario around. You can end the program that keeps that self-critical voice active in your mind, always putting yourself down, and instead uplift your own nature. That incurs significant change. Other people might even notice, however subtle they are, those changes. And they may begin to feel more comfortable with you. Because if you are going to be self-critical, especially to a high degree, what are you going to project onto others?
That
The very same criticism. And you might think that this is entirely justified. Look at this one and look at that one. Just think of, this is often depicted in movies and otherwise, just think of those nice little old church ladies who dress up to the nines and go to church to criticize how other people are dressed. It is a very common occurrence in those circles. And yet, the one place that this might best be avoided is in a house of worship. So, the main idea is what ferments within you. And we're not talking about food here, we are talking about thoughts and ideas. Will keep producing the particular kind of mental intoxication that clouds your sense of perception. Is that an appropriate analogy?
Yeah, I like it. Mm-hmm.
So it is possible to sober up cold turkey, so to speak. There are programs. We offer those kinds of sessions and discussions as do others. So disintoxication in terms of mental processes works very nicely. The end result is a much better understanding of the functions of the world and the nature of being. And we have found that more often than not, this truly is what people are seeking. They want happiness. They want to enjoy their lives. They have been told that in order to do this, to have the right to enjoy your life, you must follow all of these rules. You must work yourself to death. You must do this and you must do that, and you must behave this way, you must behave that way. So the individual accepts those things, thinking, oh, yes, this will bring me a certain level of joy, only to realize later on that the promised joy has yet to manifest. The promised fulfillment has yet to show up. They're often told, yes, you will be happy, as we suggested last time, if you only get a bigger bank account, if you only get a bigger car, a better job. And very often people recognize, I have gotten all of those, and I still have not sensed this kind of fulfillment you speak of, because that is not where it will be found, in only the external conditions. It can only be found in internal conditions. And that is why this series of discussions is about life from the inside out. That is where everything begins. Literally, the mind. The mind is the seat of your creative experience. Everything begins in there. It is the source of all your civilizations. It is the source of all your religions. It is the source of all your systems, your social systems. Everything is developed as a reflection within the mind. Which brings us to another little sidebar topic as well. As you have experienced from ourselves in the past, we are sometimes a little hard on the idea of institutionalized, pasteurized, homogenized religious processes and organizations. And there is a reason for that. And there is a reason for religion, but not the ones you think. The manner in which religions have evolved, which is quite within a certain set of parameters and expectations, in a manner of speaking, is not what they started off as. Many speakers, such as ourselves, whether of a greater platform or not, send, communicate, dispatch, share information. And the seeds of all these manners of information often appear within the consciousness of human beings as sometimes a divinely inspired idea. That is meant to create a sense of awe, inspiration, and an ever-developing sense of love, not just and not specifically for a divine supernatural sky being, but instead for the incredible potential of human beings, because that is where love is. We have equated love with potential. It is meant to inspire humankind to develop its best possible potential. over misinterpretations, mistranslations, miscommunications, and so on and so forth, over thousands of years, those original ideas get more and more distorted. You remember this little game kids and teenagers play called telephone. You start off with one sentence, but by the end, by the fifth or eighth or 10th individual, it has completely been distorted, completely taken out of shape and context. And this is the similar manner in which the original seed ideas of humankind's highest potential eventually get transformed. So the original seeds, again, are meant to help humankind connect with its great potential, to transform its realities, to understand that your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your expectations, assumptions, and beliefs, they are all the tools to shape and carve consciousness into an expression you call reality, consensus reality. But again, over time, those tools become dull. The knowledge of its application becomes dulled. It then becomes a system where certain people control other groups with. And those groups that are at the receiving end of the quote unquote management have developed a sufficient base of belief systems and assumptions about their lack of self-worth to such a degree that they then seek out those who claim to have the kind of knowledge that if they apply it in the way they say, not the way it was given, but the way they say, they might find some salvation somehow or other. Follow the rules we set down for you, and you will be saved. And first of all, before that happens, this group of people over here have to sell you a very bad bill of goods. Mainly, they have to convince you that you are a sinful individual, that you are full of iniquities, that somehow or other the original love of God has left you. But they have then the means for you to reclaim all of that if you simply adhere to their system, follow their directions, and give up, especially critical thinking in any way, shape, or form. Do not think for yourselves. Let us do the thinking for you, is the motto. Do you follow?
Yes, I'm familiar with that for sure.
So peeling back layers also applies to these kinds of thinking hamster wheels. The hamster will keep going and going and going unless somehow or other the wheel stops and the hamster can get off. The way to stop the wheel and get the hamster off is to look at the nature of the ideas and assumptions that one entertains, only to discover that there really is a world outside of your ideas about it. When you have a certain set of assumptions about the world, it seems that you only see that. You may think perhaps that if you are not careful, the world is out to get you. The banks are out to get you, the corporations, the big pharmaceuticals, the insurance companies, the governments. And as you are aware, there are more and more people getting caught up in these kinds of ideas. And they are accepting these ideas as truth, whilst in fact, they are illusory, they are transitory. So these are just additional layers they have put on, and they can be removed. The best way to remove them is to understand, first and foremost, in spite of any ideas to the contrary, that there is still within you, deep within you, a spark that is filled with love and that inspires you to become more than what you were before. Not necessarily better than yesterday, but more than what you were yesterday. This is a more non-judgmental way of expanding yourself. To say that yesterday you were not good enough, but today you might be better, asserts a certain form of judgmentalism on your own self. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the whole idea is just this. Latch onto ideas that enhance your particular values and creativities. And you will begin to see that show up in your life in one form or another. Look at it this way. Some people scoff at the idea that a coincidence could actually be more than a coincidence. So you can experiment and find out for yourself. Think of someone you used to know very well that you haven't heard of for some time. And it is very likely within a certain amount of time, you might, out of the blue, get a phone call from this person. And they might think the very same thing. Oh, I have not thought of my friend so-and-so for a while. Coincidence? Perhaps. Telepathy? Perhaps. Find out. If not a phone call, you might suddenly go to the supermarket and turn the aisle, and lo and behold, there is that friend. And you might say, I was just thinking about you yesterday. And the friend might even say, well, how about that? I was thinking about you too. This too occurs with great frequency in people's lives, but they have simply learned to chalk it up as just nothing more than a little coincidence without realizing that the very fabric of reality in itself is stitched together through telepathy. But you need to begin to experience it. You might even recognize it if you keep track of your dreams, if you write them down, whether on paper or computer, that some of your dreams actually contain a great amount of predictive elements. We're not saying that your dreams will predict the end of the world and the end of the universe, because that will not happen. But your dreams might tell you only in retrospect that some of these events and occurrences in your life actually showed up in the dreams before. And only by reviewing those dreams can you pick up the pattern. And then you will have a dream, and then you will know, oh, that element in my dream is precognitive. It is predictive. I will look for it now. Do you follow?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting too, sometimes with that too, Kris, to look for patterns. I know lately, I've had a pattern of dreams of like the theme being worrying about something that never happens, and it keeps showing up on a regular basis. But it's interesting that I'm also kind of working with that as a belief and trying to maybe remove that as a kosha. So I think it's kind of given me a clue, also of like something that I'm working on. in that way.
Indeed. And the only way to truly find out is to actually engage the process yourself. We're not saying that you need to take our word for granted on this. But if you actually do it, you apply it in principle and in practice, you will begin to see it. You always get more of what you concentrate on. That is, in effect, the bottom line of reality creation. The whole process itself has many other functions. It's not just that your dreams somehow or other predicate upcoming events, but they also teach you about the nature of dreams, the nature of dream world or dream time, the nature of physical time, and how it is actually organized in a manner quite different than your physics could possibly imply. You are informed that time flows linearly, that there's a linear progression. For instance, people may look at the so-called past lives, and often they find, or they are looking to find, the cause of some of their challenges in this life is something they might have done in a past life that trips them up. What if you began to look under that label for things in other lives that can enrich your life today? Hardly anyone ever thinks of doing that. Why? There's a question out there, and it may need to be tinkered with, thought of. For instance, even along those very lines, these other selves, reincarnational selves, they do not themselves, do pardon the pun, but only live in a linear fashion. For instance, several years ago, Joseph was pondering as to where his interest in cooking might have come from. He knows that he started enjoying cooking at a very early age. Out of the so-called blue, there was suddenly a little, we would simply call it a movie on the screen of his mind, as if something opened up and he could see one of his own selves in ancient Roman times, with all the paraphernalia of a well-stocked ancient Roman kitchen, all the pots and pans, the ovens and everything necessary, and all of the exotic meats and other foods and fruits and vegetables, implying that his employment was in the house of a well-to-do, quite likely a Roman senator. This is another way to look at past lives in your terms, without considering that obviously you must have done something bad in the past life and you are paying for it now. Some of your skills might have also developed in other venues. And for all intents and purposes, even though the scenario was cast in ancient Roman times, for Joseph, the situation actually partakes of an alternate reality where the so-called ancient Roman civilization did not perish. It was not destroyed by the Visigoths or any other form that they evolved in their own fashion. In that particular reality, the Roman Empire expanded to literally cover almost the whole world. And as they grew, as they expanded their empire, they also expanded their understanding of other cultures and assimilated the practices of many other cultures into their own, so that after some time, you could still detect certain hints of the ancient Roman Empire, but with a completely new set of thinking. And that in itself is something that Joseph did not notice, but was still part of the experience. So sometimes even viewing a so-called past life can give you far more insight into the situation than you initially perceive. Because these other lives literally coexist in parallel terms. They have not disappeared nor died away. They might have disappeared from your vision, but they still continued. Does all of this make some sense to you?
Well, yes, and we talked earlier. You talked earlier about synchronicities and telepathy and looking for those. So it was interesting when I first met Joseph. Maybe within a few years, I started writing a novel about that particular timeline and how it developed, and that they, rather than conquering, people entered that empire through peaceful means, and how it grew. And I never really finished it, but it's interesting because then it seems like we were communicating that together, or sort of exploring that, maybe not consciously. I don't know we ever talked about it, but that was exactly what I was writing about too. So that's really interesting.
Indeed, in that particular line of development, the traditionally observed Roman line of thinking had recognized that if they imposed their and only their values onto the rest of the world, they themselves would literally disappear. They needed the values and the input of other cultures in order to transform themselves organically. Otherwise, imposing their values on everyone else, they would have gotten exactly what the development in this line did: the extinction of their particular world and their worldview. So they, in this line of development, practiced changing their views in order to incorporate the values of others into theirs and not obliterate the values of others, but to accept. And this, in some ways, was evident in the Roman culture in your world up to a point. But when they stopped that, they started to decline. In this line of development, and according to Joseph's vision, they recognized that their particular values could only survive by incorporating and blending and creating a completely different kind of Roman civilization. One that truly was more democratic in that sense than what they even started out with. And that proved beneficial. And that still feeds into your system of reality because there are no closed systems. And many other developments flow through the venues of time, space. You just don't see that at this particular point. And in order for us to also explore that, we can, in a matter of speaking, examine the threads of your consensus consciousness and tease out certain elements, just like you have a system of satellite radar, you call them LIDAR, that are used in archaeological research. They can identify forgotten civilizations, either buried in the ground or buried over in tropical jungles. And then they physically go there, remove all the quote layers of brush and forest and vegetation. And lo and behold, there are the remnants of an ancient culture. So in a similar manner, you could say we have our own kind of LIDAR system that enables us to tease specific developments in your consciousness and reach you that way. So when we speak in this way, we address you, but we also address more than what you think you are. We also address sometimes sleeping potential or yet to be realized potential. So these are seeds that you develop on your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm understanding it through feelings. There's certain feeling tones and different things that come through interactions, or maybe as the viewers are viewing the session that are coming up, they may notice those, and maybe, at least I'm thinking, those might be some of those levels you're talking about.
When we spoke of removing vegetation and whatever else that is covering over an ancient culture, for example, these are representatives of certain feelings and emotions, perhaps even feeling tones, certain deep sentiments that seem to be triggered by the words that awaken something in you. So in effect, what we utilize as a vehicle is not just words, but more so the feeling tones or the particular kind of vibration, even though it is not necessarily strongly a part of our vocabulary. We do actually try to avoid using it simply because it is overused. And after a while, people become numb to it. So the idea that you can respond to certain ideas, but only from the point of view of a certain deep feeling or emotion or sentiment, something that sparks something in your awareness, that is the communication itself. And behind that lies you. Because in effect, you are the communication. We are simply awakening you to your own communication.
Well, very nice, Kris. I know we've been on a roll here.
Indeed. And rolls are always good.
But I think we're getting towards the end of the episode.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So we thank you for your consideration and take a break.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Kris. Thanks for watching. And if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.